The chair of the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission has found that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12 pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission and committees thereof are authorized to meet electronically. First item on the agenda is the action on the meeting minutes of March 23rd, 2021.
So I heard something, but I didn't hear. Could you identify? So we have a huge crowd today. Please let us know who you are and what community you are from, and then we can take the minutes accordingly.
It was Hall.
Al Hall, Candy, approve.
Okay, thank you. Al Hall.
And I'll second, Sylvia. Peter.
Thank you, Peter. That's
All right,
That's
so
Peter.
do the combination roll call and approval of the minutes.
all right. So roll call and approval of the minutes in one fell swoop. Bill Herman, Auburn.
Here and yes.
Charlie Fairman,
I'm here and yes.
Bill DeShotko, Bedford.
Here and abstain.
Bill Jean,
Present, yes.
Brian Lord.
Present, yes.
Did I miss anyone, any commissioner from Bedford?
Barbara Salvatore,
Barbara.
I don't think she's on.
Barbara Salvatore's here. I miss Barbara. How could that be?
Barbara's not there.
Yeah, I have.
Nope, she's not on.
She's not on. Okay. All right, Candia, we have Al Hall.
Yep.
Thank you. And Dick Snow.
I am present.
In Chester, we have Deb Munson.
Here and yes.
Deerfield, we have Bob Cody.
Present and yes.
In Derry, we have Jeff Moulton,
Here and yes.
John O'Connor,
Here and abstain.
and David McPherson.
Here and abstain.
Okay. In Francistown, we have Linda Kuhnhart. Linda, you might be muted. Yep, you are.
Yeah, usually I have the mic on. Here and yes.
Okay, great. In Goffstown, we have Joanne Duffy.
Here and yes.
Thank you. And Barbara Griffin
Here and yes.
and David Pierce.
I'm at the commission and yes.
Thank you. And that, for the record, was loud and clear.
Town of Bedford.
What is happening? Is someone, like, I don't see anyone trying to get in, but there's a phone ringing. So if you are not talking, if you could mute yourself until we get to you, that would be great. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate that. So in Londonderry, we have Suzanne Brunel.
Present and yes.
Thanks, Suzanne. Deb Levins
Present and yes.
and Arthur Rugg.
I am present and yes.
Thanks, Art.
Brian Battaglia from London.
Brian.
And, oh, thank you. And Brian Battaglia.
Present and yes.
Thanks, Linda. In Manchester, we have Peter Capano.
Present and yes.
New Boston, we have Mark Sunan.
Here and yes.
Thanks, Mark. And in Ware, Tom Clow.
Here, yes.
And we have a phone call. I'm thinking that's Peter Griffin from Wyndham.
I think it might be Ray Clement.
Oh, is that Ray Clement ending in 8732? You have
Sylvia, that's Lucy. Sylvia, 8732 is Lucy St. John, New Hampshire DOT.
Oh, thank you, Lucy. Hey, that's cool. Okay, thank you. And I'm gonna quick rename you so I know who this is. Lucy, New Hampshire DOT.
And I abstain from the minutes. Yep.
Okay.
Sylvia, I noticed that Bob Cody has his hand up.
Okay, Bob.
I do not have my hand up. In fact, my video was off.
Oh, okay.
The
It was the little icon for a hand up that was apparently when your video was off, so,
It's still there.
okay, thank you.
I don't see any hand up, but okay, moving along. So we heard from Lucy St. John. We have Mike Whitten, MTA.
Present and yes.
Have I missed any voting member? Okay, I think. Okay, Jeff.
Very good. So any old business before we move into the presentations, Sylvia?
I don't think so. And I just have to find Patrick Hurley. Where is Patrick?
I am here.
Wave, do something. Oh, thank you, Patrick.
You're welcome.
Now I can see. Huh. Okay, I think Linda, you guys signed in first, so you have to allow Patrick Hurley, you have to allow him to be a co-host.
Okay, I'll give it a try.
All right, you just go to the little three dots on the right-hand corner of his photo and you can.
Make co-host.
Okay, I just did that.
Okay. Take it away, Patrick.
Okay, thank you. Can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you, Sylvia, and thank you, members of the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission and MPO, for allowing me to come today to give a presentation on the Capital Corridor project development phase. Again, my name is Patrick Hurley. I'm the Director of Aeronautics, Rail and Transit at New Hampshire DOT. Planning on giving you an update on the Capital Corridor project, a summary of what we understand the Pan Am CSX acquisition to be and where we are with that, as well as a brief update on the Amtrak service that was put out in the press a couple of weeks ago and where we are with that. So with that, let me go to full screen. So the agenda for the presentation on the Capital Corridor, and Nate Miller has a copy of this, as well as a summary on the CSX Pan Am, so he'll be sending those out after the meeting today. Just to go over some of the project objectives for the Capital Corridor project development phase, some background on how we got here, the scope of the work that we're doing now, our schedule around stakeholder meetings and public informational meetings, and the next steps that to take. So the objectives of the Capital Corridor, for those that are not initiated with what we're doing for this project, is to provide an alternative to congestion on I-93 and Route 3, improve bidirectional access to jobs and housing. That would be reverse commuting, not just commuting to Boston, but people that live in the Massachusetts area who want to commute up to New Hampshire for work. We have to do the environmental work in this phase through the National Environmental Policy Act. We have to do 30% engineering design for the 30-mile extension of the Lowell line with 4 new stations and 1 layover facility, and we'll get into that a little in more further detail. And we have to do a detailed and sustainable and believable financial plan. So that's going to be a key piece to this as well. So the background, we did an alternatives analysis, which we finally referred to as the study back in 2014. That came up with 6 MBTA commuter rail extension options from Lowell, 3 Amtrak options, which would operate from North Station to Concord, and 3 express bus options or bus on shoulder options that would operate from Concord to Boston and back. The preferred alternative at that time, and this alternative was endorsed by the New Hampshire Rail Transit Authority at the time, was what's called the MBTA Manchester Regional Rail preferred option. That's the MBTA commuter line extension from Lowell up to Manchester. There would be 4 stations in Manchester, 1 in South Nashua, 1 in downtown Nashua on Crown Street, one in Bedford out on Wazora Drive to service the Manchester Airport, and one in downtown Manchester. There would be 16 Manchester trains a day and 34 Nashua trains a day. So the assumptions in the background that in the framework that we worked on back in 2014 was to extend the existing MBTA service into New Hampshire. It would generally be transparent to existing MBTA customers. We were just adding on a few more trains, and they would start in New Hampshire instead of Lowell, but once you got to Lowell, it was exactly the same service. There'd be no impacts on any existing Amtrak services that ran down on the Massachusetts side of the track. There'd be no upgrades to infrastructure south of Lowell. It would eliminate 6 weekday MBTA, what are called deadheads. Those are trains that they run every morning from Boston up to Lowell without any passengers, because they're starting the service. It's a commuter service. They start it in the morning in Lowell, but they have no layover facility in Lowell. So their trains have to start from North Station every morning without anybody in them. So that's called a deadhead service. No revenue involved with that. There'd be upgrades to the rail infrastructure north of Lowell. The track, which is owned by Pan Am in New Hampshire, would need to be upgraded to what's called Class 4 to provide maximum passenger train speeds of up to 75 miles an hour. And we're also looking at coordinated local bus service for some of the options on bus service that would go back and forth from the train stations. So the preferred option, again, was the Manchester Regional Rail. And as I mentioned, it's extending the service to Nashua and to Manchester. That had the highest ridership and economic benefits. It also had the highest cost, but it builds on 40 years of MBTA network extensions that have been done over the years. The only line that hasn't been extended in that 40-year period is the one in Lowell. And we have an interstate precedent, which with what's called the Pilgrim Partnership with Rhode Island, on how costs and funding and grants would flow between the state and the MBTA. So this gives you a little concept of what the miles and the maximum time and what we thought the opening weekday forecast for opening weekday boardings would be. So Manchester, downtown Manchester, would take about an hour and a half to get to Boston with about 270 boardings per day. The service out by the airport would take about an hour and 20 minutes with 280 boardings. Downtown Nashua to Crown Street would take about an hour to an hour and 14 minutes. And the South Nashua station would take about an hour to get to Boston, and that would anticipated to have the most daily boardings of 590 per day, for a total of about 1,560 new boardings or new commuters riding this service on a daily basis. But then in 2020, as some of you might be aware, a pandemic hit, and we're still in that pandemic, and that really affected commuter service, both on the rail side and on the bus side. That was the most adversely impacted. The commuter rail service for the MBTA has been the slowest service to recover from that. In April 2021, the MBTA restored most of the schedule, nearly all the trains, but they spreaded those trains service out more evenly over the day instead of having more service at peak times in the morning and the afternoon. They're kind of spreading it more out over the day as commuters are not coming back to Boston or work, a lot of commuters are now still working from home. And so the service needed to be adjusted accordingly. And the Nashua to Manchester service planning, therefore, we have to go back and look now and consider a range of travel demand scenarios as opposed to what we looked at in 2014. So just for more reference on the MBTA Lowell line, they've reduced the train service or the timetable by 1 trip a day. But again, they've reflected that the trains have been more spread out as opposed to having more peak service. So we're also currently looking at updating of existing and future conditions. On the infrastructure side, we're looking at the rail, the roadways, and the bridges being a key piece to this equation to see what work needs to be done, making sure the bridges are safe for passenger service. We're doing geotechnical work around soils and foundations. We're updating the demographics, the population and employment and the travel markets. We're looking at land use patterns as well as environmental issues. So one of our first steps is with confirming or updating the preferred alternative. Again, that being the Manchester Regional Commuter Rail with stations in South Nashua, Crown Street, Bedford, out on Resort Drive, and in Manchester, looking at either Depot Street or Valley Street. Valley Street was the location that's consistent with the City of Manchester's TOD plan, Transit Oriented Development Plan, that the Planning Commission did a lot of work on as well. So we're looking at the Valley Street location for that station. Looking at also having a layover facility in Manchester so that the trains don't have to deadhead from North Station up to Manchester every day. That's an appeal to the MBTA to have those trains sitting in Manchester and being able to be used for revenue service right out of the gate. We're looking at 3 potential sites right now for that. 2 of them are in the Pan Am rail yard on in the Pan Am Manchester yard. Both there's a north option and a south option for that. We're also looking at Pan Am right-of-way, which is adjacent to the Manchester wastewater treatment plant to put the layover facility. So we need to confirm the location of the stations and the layover, and that's part of the work we're doing now. On the environmental work, we've already started coordination with the Federal Transit Administration on the environmental assessment, which is what we expect that we'll have to do for environmental work. We're also planning on meeting with the Massachusetts EPA for the portion of the system that's in Massachusetts, though we don't really look at making a lot of improvements in Massachusetts. We're looking at resource inventories, historic properties, historic preservation, things along those lines, as well as natural inventories. What the impact on those are going to be, whatever impacts, how we're going to mitigate that. And we also need to outline what permitting will be required in the next phase, if and when this goes to construction. On the engineering side, again, we're looking at infrastructure and systems coming up to engineering standards. Whatever that service plan that we do finally come up with will drive what those needs are. We need to look at what standards the MBTA, Pan Am, and possibly CSX, as a result of their acquisition of Pan Am, have for station location, station standards, track standards. All that stuff is to be determined through this process. So we're going to develop a 30% level of design for that LPA. Again, track and bridge rehabilitations, signal system and grade crossing upgrades. Pan Am petitioned the STB of the Surface Transportation Board a couple of years ago now to discontinue the signal system and the grade crossing upgrades on the line in New Hampshire. So that would need to be revisited now and looked at what will it take to get those back online and up to standards for passenger rail, and looking at the design of the 4 stations and the 1 layover facility. And coming up with a cost estimate and value engineering that we can carry through to the financial planning and carry through the rest of the process as we seek construction funds through the Federal Transit Administration. And the financial plan, last but certainly not least, I mean, this is a key to the project's success. Once we know what those costs are going to be, both on a capital side and on an operating side, how we're going to pay for it. So what's the non-federal share going to be that will need to be contributed for this, and how do we get to that non-federal share, whether it's the value of in-kind contributions that the MBTA currently can do, like they have trackage rights that go up to Concord, New Hampshire. What's the value of those? We can use that value as part of the financial plan. The rights of way that they have and the station properties that may need to be acquired. What's the cost of the operations and maintenance? And is there a potential public-private partnership to help pay for those, such as transit-oriented development or value capture type of situation, TIF districts, any way that can be looked at to pay for in a New Hampshire setting, let's put it that way. So we're not looking at raising any or implementing any kind of sales tax or income tax or broad-based tax. So how do we pay for this in a non-conventional way? We need to come up with third-party agreements for the service and governance that would go to the MBTA, MassDOT, those private partners, how this all is going to work, and what the revenue and cost sharing would be in those agreements. and support, and we need to garner support for this capital investment grant through the Federal Transit Administration that would be used for the construction and the capital costs. So our schedule, this project started back in pretty much in December of 2021 and goes until end of January of 2023. We're looking at doing public and stakeholder involvement all along that way. We're currently out there now doing survey and right-of-way services, or the consulting team is, as well as the soil and geotechnical services. We're working right now on confirming and updating the alternatives. Again, looking at coming out of the pandemic, what do service levels look like? How does the service accommodate what the new normal would be around commuter patterns, evaluating the criteria and methods, evaluating alternatives and confirming that locally preferred alternative. We hope to do this summer. The environmental assessment work has started now. We hope to have that done by the end of the year. And the permitting outlining will be done this summer. The financial plan starting around now, but really most of that work will be done in 2022 as we know what the costs are going to be that we need to come up with for that match to the federal share. The federal share typically runs around 50%, so we have to come up with 50% of the capital cost, as well as most of the operating costs would need to come out of non-federal sources, at least the way it is now with a new infrastructure bill on the horizon. We don't know how how that will play out yet. And then getting prepared for to submit a capital investment grant application once we get the okay once we have a financial plan in place and get okay from our policymakers at the state level to submit that application sometime in early 2023. With service probably in another 5 years after that, once the construction's done and the service can be used down the track. So we can't do this without stakeholders and educating the public on what's going on. So we're looking at doing stakeholder meetings, small groups, a hybrid of in-person and virtual. We started those in April with our federal partners, again, the Federal Transit Administration, MassDOT, and MBTA. And we're going to be doing those through July of this year. The consultant team is putting together a fact sheet that should be done in May that will be available on our website and available to the public. We're going to have one public meeting that will be done when we have enough information to pass on to the public to get their comments on. So we're looking at targeting that for November of 2021. And we'll do notifications via postcard mailer and on the website. And again, we do have a website. If you go to the New Hampshire DOT website, you can get to it from there. And our next steps, we need to select the preferred station location for South Nashua and Manchester. So we're going to be reaching out soon to stakeholders in both those communities to engage them on the preferred station locations. The Planning Commission and the City of Manchester in your area and in MTA would certainly be involved. We'd certainly be looking to incorporate them into those meetings. We need to select a layover facility location in Manchester. Again, coordinating with the key stakeholders and continue our coordination with MBTA, MassDOT, and FTA and the regulatory agencies that need to be involved with the project. And we're in the process of coming up with a public participation plan and establishing communication channels for how we want to get our project information out. And that's basically what I have on that. I'll take some questions on the Capital Corridor piece first before we go on to the Pan Am CSX acquisition. And I don't know, Sylvia, do you want me just to drive this or?
Yeah.
Okay, John O'Connor has his hand up.
Okay, thank you, Patrick, for taking my question. I have two questions. You mentioned the commuter rail speed of up to 75 miles per hour. What is the current speed of the rails now that's going through Nashua and up?
10 miles an hour.
And my other question is, do you know what the financial situation or debt service is for the MBTA currently?
I do not know currently, but that's what we're working with MBTA on. Don't know exactly what their financial participation is going to be in this yet. There were things that we discussed in 2014 around them giving us the capital and making any improvements that need to be made south of the New Hampshire border. But again, that was 7 years ago, and we've just started engaging those discussions with them now to see what kind of commitments they can make.
And then your future, the website on the DOT, you'll have a special area just for the corridor study?
Yeah, for the project development phase, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
John O'Connor?
John O'Connor just asked, I think he's all set.
He's all
Peter
set?
C.
John, you can use the same reaction button to lower your hand. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, Patrick,
Yeah,
it's Peter. In thinking about the deadheading and the benefits to staying over, did you look at Concord? Wouldn't it be best to lay over in Concord or are we not talking about going to Concord right now?
We're not talking about going to Concord right now. Just going the locally preferred alternative that was endorsed by the Rail Transit Authority back in 2014, 2015 was service up to Manchester.
Okay, so that's the place to lay them over. As part of this whole discussion, do you include the benefits to the Manchester Airport?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that will definitely, that was part of the benefits in the 2014 study. And again, we'll be working with Manchester Airport as one of the stakeholders as we look at the station situation out on Ozoric Drive.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Yep. B. Battaglia. I'm sorry, I don't know all your first names, or I'm just looking at the screen and how you signed into Zoom.
Hi, Patrick. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Is the extension of the Lowell line, is that going to impact what's going on along the coast to Portsmouth and to Portland? Is it anticipated to alleviate any of the congestion there, bringing the line up to Nashua and Manchester?
We're not really looking at that because they do have rail service over there now with the Amtrak Down Easter. So we haven't looked when we look at what the diameter of where we think the service is going to be coming from, it doesn't really extend out to the seacoast. So no, I can't say that we've looked at what impacts that the service would have on the seacoast. It's mostly on what impacts would be on the 93 corridor and the Route 3, the Everett Turnpike corridor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Charlie F.
Yes, Patrick, thank you very much. Nice presentation. I have two quick questions. One, commuters, a lot less commuters today than there were, I believe. Has there been any update in traffic patterns on either Route 3 and 93? And the second question, does the environmental assessments include positive impacts as well as negative? The positive impact primarily being the reduction in cars and so on.
Yeah, it does. I'll answer the second question first. Yes, the environmental assessment would look at positive, what it does to help alleviate congestion and carbon emissions, things along those lines. But it is more geared towards making sure we don't adversely impact the environment with this project. On the travel patterns and the commuter patterns, I mean, we've seen a slight uptick in travel now that we're a year into the pandemic, but we will need to look at that on this project from a service level, how many, what the service should look like for those commuters. And right now, I just don't have a crystal ball on how many people are going to be going back to the office versus how many people are still going to be working from home, and what businesses are going to allow people to work from home as we come out of the pandemic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, I'll go into what we know about CSX and the Pan Am acquisition. Nate wanted to ask me if I knew what was going on with that. On the Pan Am acquisition, back in February of 2021, CSX and Pan Am filed what's called a control and merger application with the U.S. Surface Transportation Board. Surface Transportation Board is the governing body for all things freight railroad, whether it's acquisitions and mergers or rate setting or appeals from shippers on what rates railroads are charging. So that all goes through what we call the STB, the Surface Transportation Board. With approval, CSX would acquire all Pan Am subsidiaries, as well as 50% ownership of Pan Am Southern. Pan Am Southern is a partnership between Pan Am and Norfolk Southern that operates mostly in Western Massachusetts and up into Vermont. The application states that an agreement, Norfolk Southern originally disapproved of this acquisition because not knowing what that would do to Pan Am Southern, but CSX and Norfolk Southern reached an agreement that a third party would actually operate the Pan Am Southern route. That third party would be the Berkshire and Eastern Railroad, which is a subsidiary of the Genesee and Wyoming Railroad that operates quite a bit of service around New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, that they would operate the Pan Am Southern service. This is going to get a little into the weeds, but the CSX and Pan Am filed what's called filed with the STB as what's called a minor transaction. And that minor transaction, under the minor transaction, the certain criteria need to be met. It can't involve the control or merger or two or more Class 1 railroads, and the class of a railroad is determined by their gross operating revenue, and it has to be quite a bit to be in Class 1. CSX is a Class 1 railroad, but Pan Am is a Class 2 railroad, so they met that criteria. The transaction clearly will not have any anti-competitive effects, or those anti-competitive effects will clearly be outweighed by the transaction's anticipated contribution to the public interest. So two railroads that interchange with Pan Am here in New Hampshire sent letters of support for the acquisition under a minor transaction, those two being the New Hampshire North Coast Railroad, which operates over on the seacoast, and the Milford-Bennington Railroad, which operates on the state-owned Hillsborough Branch Railroad. They both sent in letters of support. A third railroad that operates in New Hampshire and interchanges with Pan Am is the Vermont Rail System, formerly New England Southern Railroad. They operate on the state-owned Concord to Lincoln Railroad line. They did not comment with regard to the New Hampshire-based service, but they did comment with regard to service provided in Vermont. The state of Massachusetts filed comments with the STB that they thought the transaction should be considered a significant transaction as it has regional significance, does not address how new freight service may threaten commuter service disruption, where freight and commuter passenger trains both jointly operate. Does not address, and they had some issues around the safety of the Wachusett Reservoir, which the railroad corridor goes right through. And the state of Massachusetts owns many of the lines that are involved in this transaction that Pan Am currently runs on. The state of New Hampshire does not. The state of Vermont and Vermont Rail System also filed comments stating the transaction should be considered significant because of an inadequate competitive analysis. Vermont's in a situation where a lot of the service, again, comes from Pan Am Southern that interchanges with Genesee and Wyoming through the New England Central Railroad. But now it would all be through Genesee and Wyoming, and they were fearful of getting competitive rates to make those services work. Again, they're both highly dependent on Pan Am Southern to do that. No other New England states filed comments, but many other interested parties sent in comments supporting or opposing the transaction. New Hampshire, we stayed kind of neutral, not really having a lot of experience with CSX, not seeing how this would dramatically affect service in New Hampshire. But we did send in a notice of intent to participate so that we now get all the filings and comments. We're apprised by those through any STB decisions. So we do get information on where they are with that. But on March 19th, the STB decided the transaction would be considered significant, did not meet the criteria for a minor transaction. So they must meet different procedural and informational requirements. They have to provide a lot more information around operating plans, why they don't think that the service is competitive, would have anti-competitive effects, and other issues. So under that decision, CSX and Pan Am needs to refile an application with that additional information. They propose to do that by April 26th. So I am assuming they did that. It has not yet been posted to the STB website. And the STB has put out a procedural schedule that they think should be followed. That procedural schedule would be by the end of March or the beginning of March of next year, that they will have a reading on where that's going to go or how that's going to be affected. So that's basically what I have on Pan Am and CSX, and I'll take any questions on that.
Actually, I don't know that we have a whole lot of time for questions.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to take so much time, but
No, I'm glad you could do an overview if there's.
yeah,
maybe-
it's not the easiest thing to understand. I did put a 1 to 2 page summary together that Nate has that he can send out. So you can read it at your leisure. And then if you have any more questions, you can ask on that. On the Amtrak piece, don't really have a lot of information. Amtrak sent out a press release about 3 weeks ago saying that under their reauthorization, they want to provide service up to Concord. I believe you got a handout on that. When they proposed this a couple of years ago, they met with the commissioner and the department. And at that time, they were looking at a scenario where they would pay, it would be service up to Concord. It would be an intercity service. So it's less frequency, more business oriented than a commuter service. They would be looking at paying for all the capital costs for that and the first 2 years of operating costs. And then the state would have to pick up the tab as they go forward on operating costs. It is more expensive to operate a Amtrak service than it is a commuter service. They have different amenities that need to be in place on an Amtrak. If you've ever been on an Amtrak train, there's dining service, there's there's business class, there's first class. So it costs more to operate that type of service. We are actually we're trying to schedule a meeting with Amtrak for next week. So hopefully you'll have some more details on that after that meeting. But for now, we're just seeing where that goes. That's just a wrinkle in this whole thing that we need to look at as we go forward. So that's what I have for today.
Okay, before we move on, also just to acknowledge we have joining us Alfred Eisenberg from Francistown. We have Cutler Brown from Hooksett, and I believe ending in 2940. Is that Peter Griffin?
Yes, it is me, Sylvia.
Okay, thank you. And then we have one other caller ending in 4803.
Ray Clement.
Thanks, Ray. That's what I thought. Thank you. Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to speak today. It was good to see everybody, and I'll be back, I'm sure.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
All right, next up is James on the Transportation Alternatives Program. I believe we have to review and approve it. So, James, are you ready?
I am here. This is James Veo. I'm in the office. I'm ready to present. I just need to be made a co-host so I can share my screen.
So who's ever in the conference room, there you go, Linda. That's something you have to do.
Okay, I just have to find, oh, there he is. Okay, let's see. Okay, all set.
Thank you. All right, can people see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. All right, so today going to provide a update and summary on the progress of the Transportation Alternatives Program, also known as TAP, round 4 funding and project prioritization. I won't go through all of this, but this is a detailed timeline of how the various milestones of the round 4 funding application have come into being. That includes announcements from DOT, letters of intent received by DOT, release of the application, workshops, a workshop held by New Hampshire DOT. The deadline for application, which was in March. And then the rundown of review by staff, a TAC subcommittee, the TAC policy, the TAC committee as a whole, and on April 15th, and then today, which is the MPO will finalize. We hope the MPO will finalize project prioritization so that we can forward it along to DOT as they initiate their review process. What's next? New Hampshire's DOT's draft timeline says that in May they will be scoring and finalizing rankings submitted, and submit that to New Hampshire DOT Commissioner Sheehan. In June, that final list of TAP projects will be approved by New Hampshire DOT Commissioner for award, and documentation will be put together for an August review by Governor and Council for approval of TAP funding award. The TAP evaluation subcommittee, which met on April 8th, was comprised of 4 members of the TAC committee, Bruce Thomas, Colleen Malou, Dick Snow, and Linda Kuhnhart. And then subsequent following that, on April 15th, the TAC voted to recommend the subcommittee's weighted scoring and project prioritization to the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission MPO. It is important to note, and I have it in bold here, that the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission MPO may accept or modify the TAC project's priority, project prioritization and scoring recommendations as they see fit. The TAP funding round 4 project evaluation criteria was slightly different from round 3. That was discussed amongst the TAC committee and approved by the MPO. That weighting, as a recap, is shown here across 5 criteria segments, with the weightings on the right, and we will see this again, but I show this slide because if anybody wants to dig into what the description of each criteria is, we have a slide. We can come back to this if desired. The project applications for TAP funding were received by New Hampshire DOT from the following towns: Bedford, Derry, Manchester, New Boston, and Wyndham. And the TAP applications are summarized as follows. In Bedford, there is, it shouldn't say letter of intent, but there's a full application. Bedford has proposed the construction of 3,780 linear feet of sidewalk on the east side of Old Bedford Road between Route 114 and the Route 101. It's an overpass. That project was called out for in the 2014 bike ped plan put together by the town of Bedford. Improvements are recommended for the bike and pedestrian improvements were also recommended for the area in the town's 2020 master plan update. Project cost estimate was provided, and Bedford has 100% of its local match needed to complete the project from a recently completed nearby development, which provided off-site development, off-site improvement fees. The town's DPW is committed to regular maintenance of the sidewalk facility once installed, and this project is the only one in the group that is sort of fits the criteria as a safe routes to school type project connecting schools with housing, medical, and other uses. One other point of note is that a high proportion of the census tracts population are 17 and younger at 19.8%, and 65 and older at 21.4%. Anticipated costs, some of the challenges for this project as identified in their TAP application. Anticipated costs for a local project administrator process is anticipated to be underestimated or may run into budget challenges. Existing engineering may need to be supplemented to meet federal requirements for a locally administered project. The narrative did not address directly how drainage and curbing would be resolved relative to improvements that have been made to Old Bedford Road already. No crash history was presented to demonstrate a need for safety improvement. The next project is from the town of Derry to construct a 1,900 linear feet extension of the Derry Rail Trail between Madden Road and the London-Derry town line. This project's, some highlights from this project is the trail completion to the Londonderry town line has been called out in Derry's 2005 recreational plan and extensively in the town's recently completed master plan update. Letters of support were provided from town council and town administrator, regional economic development center, the local economic development director, the Derry Trail Alliance, and the land controlling property owner. Detailed engineer's cost estimate was provided to support the project budget in the TAP application. Matching funds were identified in the Ash Street TIF district for the fiscal year 2025-2026. The TAP application anticipated some environmental factors around the installation of a rail trail here, including a crossing of Beaver Brook and construction around existing fiber optic line. Some of the challenges include limited multimodal connectivity via CART, which is the transit service provided, the transit provider in this portion of the SNHPC region. Third in the list here, City of Manchester construct a 4,800 linear foot multi-use path adjacent to Canal Street between Granite Street and Brook Street. And the highlights for this project include project concepts supported in the 2020 master plan update, 2021 now. The 20 concepts supported in the 2017 Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission Complete Streets Toolkit, Manchester Connects action kits, if people are familiar with that, and the 2012 Regional Trails Plan. Letters of support provided by the Board of Aldermen, Mayor, Health Department, Planning Department, Chamber of Commerce, Manchester Connects, Queen City Bike Collective, the YMCA, and Manchester Moves, which is a rail trail nonprofit organization within the city. Project fills the gap in the Granite State Rail Trail in downtown Manchester, where it would otherwise be difficult to implement a trail facility. Facility is in a census tract with a 29.1% poverty rate. Some of the challenges for this project include that the project scope as defined in the TAP application was not identified in any one planning existing formal plan for within the city or the region. Board resolution to support TAP application does not explicitly commit funding as of today, although it would go through a capital improvement plan process similar to some of the other applications cited. The project may have unidentified operational and/or traffic impacts due to the reduction in the size of Canal Street. Fourth on the list here, Town of New Boston construct a tunnel under Parker Road to connect Phase 2 of the New Boston Rail Trail to Phase 3. Some highlights from this project: letter of support from Conservation Commission, Board of Selectmen, noted support from Community Survey, Trail Subcommittee, and volunteers. Some engineering completed for this project to date. Some demonstrated ability to locally match funds through fundraising. Project would eliminate steep slope at the existing at-grade crossing of Parker Road on what is an otherwise accessible trail facility. Project appears to be reasonable or to the scope of work defined in the TAP application. Some of the challenges here were that the project did not appear to have specific reference in the town's master plan, and there's uncertainty as to the town warrant resolution for funding the TAP project if fundraising does not meet the local match needs. Last on the list here, Town of Wyndham, improvement of 12,000 linear feet of the Greenway Trail between Old Mill Road and I-93 improvement. Between Old Mill Road and I-93, and then and another improvement of 1,000 linear feet of state right-of-way between I-93 and North Lowell Road, which is shown in blue here. Some of the highlights from this project is prior investment in the trail by New Hampshire DOT at 93 with the installation of a grade separated crossing under the highway. Existing agreement between the town and state on the use of state right of way for trail facility for that 1,000 linear feet to the east of the highway. Letters of support from the Parks Department, Trail Alliance, Conservation Commission, local senator and representative, Board of Selectmen. Project supported in the town's master plan. Project provides significant improvement of a trail facility, allowing connection to 3 abutting towns. Project connects to the Granite State Rail Trail at what is a pretty high use area, and the census tract for this project area included a significant portion of residents who are 17 years of age or younger at 27.3%, or 65 years of age or older at 15.2%. Some of the challenges with this project include that only 12.5% of the total local match have been appropriated to date. And that additional project information was not provided in the application, i.e. Some of the projects were able to provide engineering level estimates of cost. And so with that, we have the TAC subcommittee and the TAC committee recommended for value for these projects, as well as their prioritization. And we put these, we reordered the applications to go from priority 1 down to priority 5 as they are weighted in the recommendations from the TAC. And so we have Derry as priority 1, Manchester as priority 2, New Boston as priority 3, Wyndham as priority 4, and Bedford as the 5th priority relative to the various categories for weighting. And with that, I am done talking, and I open it up to question, comments, and discussion. Open it up for any comments. Jeff, I don't know if you want to run the meeting, or if you want me to. Bill DeShaco has his hand up.
Yeah, James, why don't you take the questions? Yeah.
Sure. Go ahead, Bill.
Hey, James. Appreciate all the hard work you guys have done on this, but as you might expect, we have some very in-depth questions on the scoring and some of the conclusions that you presented. And if you don't mind, I'd like to just sort of read through some of my thoughts on this, and I'll be happy to ask Jeff Foote, who's our department head of our Public Works Department, to fill in any specifics that people may need. But my comments are based on these facts. We're looking at project readiness and support. This particular project is fully engineered and permitted. Fixed drainage and stormwater basins are in place. No land taking is required. The project is ready to be begun and completed and only needs the installation of curbing, subsoil preparation, and asphalt paving. The price estimate is based on a bid received 5 years ago, has been increased to reflect material and labor increases. The costs are estimated at $500,000 for 3,800 feet of sidewalk. This compares favorably to the cost of the state of New Hampshire in installing sidewalks along Route 101 that occurred in the past year, and their cost is $30 per linear foot. Our estimated cost is close to $100 per linear foot for just curbings and asphalt. That's the only work that has to be done. That covers both the project readiness, it could be begun tomorrow, as well as the financial ability to perform this. As everybody knows, we already have the money in an account. It's available and requires no further action, and it's been supported by the town council on this. The support's been given by the town council, all the various departments we have within the town, as well as the school district. And this is an important part here. This, as was mentioned, this probably should have been taken care of on a safe routes to school type of thing, but those programs no longer exist. They've been rolled into this, the TAP program. However, the whole purpose, one of the whole purposes for the sidewalk is to provide a safe route to school for approximately 5% of the student population of a school that basically services kindergarten through 6th grade, the youngest part of our populations. There are over 20 kids that are currently going to that particular school that are not within a district where they could be allowed to be bused. So there is two cases then for getting there. They can either walk with their parents, or they're going to have their parents drive them. Already we have a very highly used road that is over capacity around the school. It's around a very dangerous corner. There are a number of day schools and churches in the area that also attract traffic during that time. In short, walking along the road is not a safe street for either a child or an adult. We also have a number of assisted living facilities in that particular area. And I'd like to see the residents have the opportunity to get out and get some exercise through there. They currently cannot do that using this particular road, as it's said. We feel the scoring ratings are unbelievably low, given the fact that this particular project is complete and ready to go, and we just don't understand this. In terms of connectivity, the sidewalk connects every school within the community through sidewalk services, with the exception of one that is which is in the northwest section of town, which is not serviced by sidewalks in any area. It also allows connection into the library by sidewalk, to main shopping areas, to restaurants. It serves as a luxury hotel area that attracts a number of visitors from out of town that would like to get out and walk around Bedford and see this various stuff. And it's across the area from a retail shopping area, and more importantly, a particularly and growing healthcare provider system. It just makes no sense to rank this as low as you have, and we'll be happy to, we're asking everybody to reconsider the particular scoring. And that's my pitch, and we will answer any questions that are brought our way. Thank you.
James, if you wouldn't mind, let me just add on a couple words onto Bill's good comments. I think he's done a nice job of advocating and describing the Bedford project. I think that thank you for having this sheet up, and thanks for the good work as well. It seems that from the description of what you've given, that there's two kind of conspicuous numbers here in terms of the project connectivity being a 4 versus others 9, 7, and 8. And also the project readiness being a 6 versus others. It seems that these are two things that are sort of features of the Bedford project, but yet we're in the scoring ones where the Bedford project scored the worst when it came down to it. You know, when you compare and contrast your identification of the projects versus what the scoring is. So I guess I would just draw your attention to probably the first line item there on a relative basis. So just comparing across projects, it does not seem appropriate that the Bedford project would be scored least, yes, thank you, in that line. And then also the 4 on the project connectivity, given the way you've described it. So I'd highlight that relative comparison as well.
I want to note, I can't see if anyone else has their hand up. It looks like it's
Linda
possible.
does.
Okay, great.
Linda. Go ahead, Linda. And you have to unmute yourself. Still waiting for Linda Kuhnhart to unmute herself.
Maybe it looks like Bill Jean has his hand up. Maybe we, oh,
wait,
Linda
I
unmuted.
found it. Yeah, I'm sorry. I said I was happy to let James go. I did sit on the subcommittee, and I don't have all of the slides we used for that, but I do remember that I think it was the Bedford one when the reason that the 6 and the 4 are a 6 and a 4 is because the question was, it didn't appear in the information that we were given to review, all that stuff about all the schools connecting and the library connecting, basically much of what I just heard wasn't part of that information. But what we were looking at was the lack of actual engineering stuff and the drainage things and whether the granite was going to be there or not. It wasn't clear to us that enough investigation of the actual work that needed to be done and the actual cost of the actual work to be done had been completed, which led us to give lower scores for those 2 positions.
May I answer that?
Go ahead.
Right,
I think it just rebuttal, and then we'll have Bill Jean and Mike Whitten.
Sure. So Jeff Wood here, Bedford Public Works. So I'm getting some background feed. So I just want to share with everyone that the plans for this project are complete. They have been complete since 2015 when we reconstructed Old Bedford Road. The closed drainage is in place for this project. No environmental permits are needed. No easements are needed. The plan set is complete. It has been for 5 years. This is a very simple project. We just didn't have the money to complete it back in 2015. And as Councilor DeShaco shared that we recently received some money from another nearby offset development. I'll tell you that the estimate that was provided was by me, but in doing so, I also contacted the contract administrator for the Route 101 project and shared what I had with him, and he gave me some suggestions. I then just recently, because we just got the feedback this morning, I consulted with McFarland Johnson, Mike Long, who has completed numerous LPA projects, and they agree with my estimate. They came up with 350,000, which is what I did, and then we added 20% on for inflation. So we are very confident that we have an estimate for this project for the construction phase that is extremely conservative, meaning that we have plenty of money. So I think that, you know, we identified in the application, and maybe Jillian Harris can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that we identified that the closed drainage was complete to construct the sidewalk. So as Councilman DeShaco shared, we need granite curbing, we need asphalt, we need some select materials underneath the sidewalk and some fine grading behind it. This project is as ready as any project that I've ever been involved with in my years here. And not only that, is I consulted with one of our in-house staff members who is a retired DOT contract administrator that's done hundreds of millions of dollars worth of projects throughout the state. and he's LPA certified as well. And we're very confident we can build this project for the amount of monies that we outlined in the application. As far as letters of support, when we put this thing together, we could have sent 25 letters in, and Tom Jameson was very explicit. He didn't want letters from all sorts of people. He wanted direct stakeholders in these projects, and that's what we followed directions. We could have had so many more letters of support for this, but we were trying to follow directions. And I just think that, you know, if you want to bring up some of the cons and the pros that you showed earlier, I think that we've covered all of the challenges for our project, and they were in the application. And I feel very confident we have a really good project here, and the connectivity may not be regional, but having my office really in this area, there is so much need for this project. And you know, this area is growing, and there's private schools, there's public schools, and you know, the FBI is around the corner. We have manufacturing, we have the fire station, we have a daycare. On this side of 101, there's a daycare. We have medical office buildings, restaurants. So I just think that this is a great use and a great application. And I was sorry that most of the challenges came down to me and not the merits of the project. So I'll end it with that. But thank you very much for your consideration.
Looks, I think we had Mike Whitten, then Bill Jean, and then Becky.
I just wanted to point out, I've served on these type of committees a couple times in the past. Somebody's got to be fifth. It doesn't mean that that project is not a valuable project or doesn't have definite need in the community. And looking at, you know, Bill's points, he brings up a couple of good ones, but even increasing the score, moving project readiness and support, say we give it 8 points, say we bump project connectivity to 7 points. Recalculating that still doesn't get this project out of 5th place. You know, you could pick up 1/10 of a point in that top line, maybe another 0.8 of a point below. They're 1.13 points out of 4th place. I just don't think there's enough here to close the gap.
We did do a what if scenario because at the TAC meeting, there were several comments. The representative from New Boston thought it was scored too highly. The representative from Manchester thought theirs was scored too low, and Bedford thought theirs was scored too low. So we did do a what if scenario, which sort of follows exactly what Mike Whitten is saying, in that basically by rescoring them, and James, you can bring that up if you have it available, but Derry and Manchester still came in 1st and 2nd. Bedford, I think, came in 3rd, and then it was maybe New Boston, Wyndham. But yeah, it's difficult because like Mike said, he's been part of these subcommittees scoring, and they can only score as far as what's provided to them in the application. We don't have the availability of Jeff Foote and other members from Bedford, for example, telling us that all the engineering is there and that the stormwater is already put in, all of those things. That really wasn't even part of the application in this case. James went and found the engineering drawing and provided that to the committee. So it's difficult, but I'll be quiet and we can continue with the rest of the group. I think Bill Jean and then Becky and now Bob.
Thank you, James. I appreciate all the comments previously. And Mike, I respect that. I haven't done the math, but I would be curious, I think arguably with what's been presented, and I don't know the procedure here from reassessing and reevaluating these, but certainly the potential for success piece of it, you could arguably, with the data that was just revealed, bring those scores to 9s and 10s, I would imagine, just from a
project readiness, financial readiness, and certainly the feasibility has been vetted. The connectivity, I can imagine that score should be able to be increased significantly. And with those heavier weights to each one of those items, I would be curious to see how that's reevaluated. And again, not being completely familiar how we can be reassessed here, I would just offer those comments on top of what's been stated. Thanks.
The TAC committee's recommendation is just that, a recommendation. So, you know, the MPO is free to recommend changes to the scoring, and I can pull up the scoring sheet to do that. But before we, maybe before any action is taken there, we can go through the rest of these people's comments. I see Becky Hebert has her hand up, and I believe she was next, and then Bob Cody.
Thanks, James. I do want to thank the TAC committee for the hard work they put into the scoring. I know it's never easy. And to Mike's point, I don't think what Bedford's asking is for the gap to be closed. I think we just want these two aspects of the scoring to be reevaluated and the project kind of land where it lands. I have the application open, the application that was sent to DOT, and the engineered plans were attached to that application. So that was part of the application, not something that was kind of added after the fact or provided after the fact to TAC or to DOT. And I have the project connectivity narrative open, and I'm happy to answer questions if the MPO has questions regarding the narrative that was submitted with the application for project connectivity. It's extensive. It's probably one of the most detailed sections in the application, and it outlines, you know, all the various resources and amenities that the project sidewalk would connect in Bedford. And it doesn't have a regional connectivity component because it is a pedestrian sidewalk, but it fills a vital gap. And that's one of the direct questions that DOT asks in their project connectivity section of this grant application is, does the project fill a vital gap in an existing transportation network or plan? And I really think the application demonstrates that there is a vital gap that's being filled by the sidewalk connecting Memorial School to the Route 101 sidewalks that exist today. And it explains that those Route 101 sidewalks then, you know, spill out into the community, connecting all types of resources and amenities. And there's a map that was also included with the application. I'm not sure if James has a copy of that, but it actually identified the amenities and those resources that were closest to the sidewalk and that would benefit from the sidewalk. So, you know, looking at Memorial School, the Bedford Village Inn, a workforce housing development, an assisted living facility, nearby neighborhoods. So, you know, this was provided in addition to a narrative talking about, you know, how the sidewalk connected to these existing and newly constructed sidewalks along Route 101. So I just wanted to point that out, that the connectivity piece wasn't absent from the application. And, you know, it's always hard for a sidewalk to compete with a multi-use rail trail, which is obviously going to provide a completely different experience for the user and a different amenity to the community. But where there's no longer a Safe Routes to Schools grant program, you know, we do feel that this project fills a vital gap. And I guess that's it.
Bob Cody, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yes, thank you. Regarding the evaluation scoring sheet, there seems to be a criteria that I'm not sure was considered but might be important, and that is the overall cost of the project. So, for example, if the Bedford project, for example, the total cost was relatively low compared to some of the other projects, it would be like picking off low-hanging fruit from a tree. So I'm just curious why that element or why that criteria is not part of the scoring, or maybe it is, and I'm not seeing where that comes into play.
James, can you bring up the application? I must have been mixed up with another application. And can you show us the engineering drawing? Just so
Yeah, Bob, well, they're showing that on the screen. I'm just kind of to your question. You know, what they're looking for here is the adequacy of the proposed budget and a level of confidence that the project can be delivered according to that proposed budget. Whether the project is a $1 million project or a $500,000 project, you know, they compete against each other on the other merits. What they're not looking for, I think, is it used to be years ago that communities would kind of be a little too aggressive with their budgets, sharpen the pencil because they thought that a lower cost looked more attractive in the program, and then what happened was the program got filled with underestimated projects that didn't move forward. And so there's a lot of the projects cost what they cost and compete against each other on the merits. So the biggest thing here is the level of comfort that the MPO would have with the cost estimate that Bedford has proposed here. At the subcommittee level, there were some questions raised about the ability to deliver this project and this scope of work for that budget. If the MPO as a whole feels like, based on what you've heard today, that you have a higher level of confidence in the proposed budget to be able to deliver this scope of work, then feel free to reassess the recommended scoring accordingly. But it's really the budget consideration is about, can the project be delivered according to the proposed budget? And the worst case scenario here is that the project gets funded and 18 months, 2 years down the road, when it's time to go to construction, it's whoops, all of a sudden it's a $700,000 project instead of a $500,000 project. And it sits for years because it's very, very difficult to go back and get more funding later on to deliver the project. So that, I think, is kind of the lens that the subcommittee viewed this through. But certainly if the MPO as a whole has a high level of confidence in that proposed budget, then you should or could or should reevaluate it accordingly.
Thank you.
Just want to note relative to engineering, there were a few engineering drawings included in the application. There were these 3 sheets. And as part of checking the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission staff checking to see if each project met the eligibility criteria, I did go and do a search on Bedford's webpage to find the corresponding complete package of engineering for this. And so on their webpage, they do have this complete package of web engineering that is, stamped by Jeff. This was not included in the application, but it was something that we found and referenced and looked at. And it's kind of hard to see here, but they're including in this drawing, this package for the reconstruction of Old Bedford Road, a sidewalk, and some drainage is shown in here. And this was a point of discussion amongst the subcommittee about, how much of the scope of work was addressed here. Did drainage need to be installed? Those questions were not answered in the application, and for that reason, there was not a high level of confidence that the project would be able to be built for the budget that was laid out in the application. And that really came down to just a gap in information in the application.
Mr. Chairman, Val Hall, Candia. I would like to attempt to move things along here. I would move that we approve the TAP project prioritization as presented very finely by James Bale.
This is Mike Witten. I'll second.
Okay. Jeff, did you want to have discussion or am I going through the roll call?
Well, we talked about Bedford, but were there other towns that wanted to make any comments before we go to a vote? I guess not. So
All right, I'll do the roll call. Okay, Auburn, Bill Herman.
Yes.
In Bedford, Bill DeShaco.
Oh.
Charlie Fairman.
Hey.
And I'll just pick one of the alternates for the 3 seats in Bedford. Bill Jean.
Nay.
Candia, Al Hall.
Yes.
Dick Snow. Dick, you're muted. All right, we can come back to Dick. Chester, Deb Munson.
Abstain.
Deerfield, Bob Cody.
Yes.
Derry, Jeff Moulton.
yes.
Thank you. John O'Connor.
Yes.
David McPherson.
Yes.
In Francistown, Al Eisenberg.
Yes.
And Linda Kuhnhart.
Yes.
Goffstown, Joanne Duffy.
Sorry, could you repeat the motion?
Could someone repeat the motion?
It's to approve as presented.
Okay, yes.
And you're saying yes to that motion, Joanne?
Yes. Thank you.
Barbara Griffin?
Yes.
David Pierce?
Yes.
In Hooksett, Cutler Brown?
Yes.
Londonderry, Brian Battaglia?
Yes.
Suzanne Brunel?
Yes.
Deb Levin?
Yes.
And Arthur Rugg?
Yes.
Manchester, Pano?
Yes.
Raymond Clement?
Yes.
In New Boston, Mark Sunan?
Nay.
In Ware, Tom Clow?
Yes.
In Wyndham, Peter Griffin?
Yes.
Lucy St. John from New Hampshire DOT? Lucy, you're muted if you're still here. And Mike Whitten, MTA.
Yes.
Okay.
Dick Snow.
Did you want to go back to Dick Snow?
Oh, Dick Snow, were you able to come in? I don't hear anything from Dick Snow. I'm not sure what happened there. Dick, are you available? All right, he maybe stepped away. All right, I think that was a good discussion and I appreciate everyone's input. And that's the end of our MPO meeting.
Just a note, Sylvia, that Lucy St. John abstained.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I see it in
Sylvia,
the
quick question. What's the next step for this? When you transmit these scores to DOT with a letter, I'm assuming, would you also be able to forward the meeting minutes from the TAC meeting and this MPO discussion?
How does that work, Nate?
I think the next step is, yes, there'll be a letter that goes to DOT. I think that letter will be going probably by the close of business today because we're kind of at our bewitching hour in terms of the DOT's deadline to get regional priorities in. I don't think the minutes from this MPO meeting will be ready by the time that the letter is submitted. But yes, we submit a letter with regional priorities to New Hampshire DOT. then it goes to the statewide evaluation process, and one of the criteria in the statewide evaluation process is the regional priority. So there will be another evaluation of all of these projects that happens at a state level, but one of the components of that review will be where it was ranked regional.
Okay, I guess we need a motion to adjourn the MPO.
Auburn moves to adjourn.
And I'll second.
I'll just take thumbs up all the way around on that one so we can move ahead. Thank you. I'm seeing, thank you for that thumbs up. Okay, good. Jeff, we're ready for the commission meeting. We do have a presenter here today, so.
Right, first we got to do the action on the meeting minutes from March 23rd.
Approved.
Auburn will second.
Thank you. Did you get that, Linda?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I'll go through the roll call. Bill Herman in Auburn,
Yes.
Bill DeShaco Bedford,
Abstain.
Charlie Fairman,
Yes.
Bill Jean,
Yes.
Brian Lord. Maybe we lost Brian. Al Hall, Candy.
On mute, yes.
Oh, thanks, Brian. Let's see, Dick Snow. Still don't have Dick there. Chester, Deb Munson.
Yes.
Bob Cody.
Yes.
In Derry, we have Jeff Moulton.
Yes.
John O'Connor.
Abstain.
Dave McPherson.
Abstain.
Francistown, Alfred Eisenberg.
Yes.
Linda Kuhnhart.
Yes.
And in Goffstown, we have Joanne Duffy.
Yes.
Barbara Griffin.
Yes.
And David Pierce. Okay, maybe David had to leave.
Yeah, David left.
Okay, David left. All right. And in Hooksett, Cutler Brown.
Yes.
In Londonderry, Brian Battaglia.
Yes.
Suzanne Brunel.
Yes.
Deb Levens.
Yes.
Arthur Rugg.
Yes.
And in Manchester, Peter Capano. Looks like
Yes.
Peter.
Sorry.
Oh, thank you, Peter. Okay. Ray Clement.
Yes.
In New Boston, Mark Sunan.
Yes.
And in Ware, Tom Clow.
Yes.
And Wyndham, Peter Griffin.
Yes.
All right. So we're lucky enough, if I might, Jeff, just to, and Linda, if you can let Cordell Johnson have the mic, so to speak, he's got a screen to share. We're lucky enough to have Cordell Johnson here from New Hampshire Municipal Association. He's going to share with us a sort of a brief run through on 2021 legislative items.
Yes, I just made Cordell a co-host, so he should be able to share his screen.
Okay, hello, everybody. I'm just going to start talking and assume that you can hear me and someone will make a motion or something if you can't. For those of you who don't know, I'm Cordell Johnston, Government Affairs Counsel at the New Hampshire Municipal Association. And Sylvia asked me to do a brief legislative update on bills that may be of interest to the commission. We follow about 300 bills every year, and so obviously not all of those are of interest to you. I did prepare a little bill table of bills that I think are most likely to be of interest. And if I can do this, I will share my screen. So you should be able to see that now. I see, yeah, I see. I think Sylvia just gave me a thumbs up. So this is just a a very small number of the bills, but as I said, the ones that I think might be of most interest to members of the RPC. And I'll just go through them, describe them briefly, and tell you where they are. And if anyone has any questions, you can ask me either as we go or ask me at the end. And some of these are no longer no longer a threat. I guess not all of them are threats, but as is usually the case, we see more bad bills, at least from our perspective, more bad bills than good ones in the legislature. So the first one, House Bill 132, would essentially require that municipalities allow half-acre zoning for residential zoning anywhere that has municipal water and sewer. And obviously that would be a drastic change for a lot of municipalities. And we had concerns about that. That bill has been retained in the Municipal and County Government Committee in the House. A retained bill means that it's basically nothing more will happen during the current legislative session. But in the fall, the committee will meet and review this bill and make a recommendation for it. So it will come back next year, January of next year, with a recommendation of either ought to pass or inexpedient to legislate. So nothing's going to happen with that immediately, but it will merit some attention in the fall. House Bill 154 enables municipalities to use RSA 79E, that's the Community Revitalization Tax Relief Statute, and that's a municipal option, which generally applies to, is used for things like restoration of historic buildings. But House Bill 154 would expand that and allow a municipality to use that to create, I think they're called housing opportunity zones, to provide tax relief to those who develop housing, and especially affordable housing in designated zones. That has passed the House. It's in the Senate Ways and Means Committee, had a hearing already a couple of weeks ago, and so it's waiting for action by that committee. House Bill 189 would have required that municipalities allow up to 3 accessory dwelling units on every residential dwelling. That we thought would create some significant problems. That fortunately, that bill was killed in the House. House Bill 284, I don't know how much you're interested in this, but it deals with the issue of involuntarily merged lots. About 10 years ago, the legislature prospectively prohibited municipalities from effecting any more involuntary mergers of lots. And then it gave those property owners whose lots have been involuntarily merged a period to request that those lots be unmerged, so to speak. The original deadline for that was in 2016, I think. In 2016, they extended it to this year. And this year, House Bill 284 would have extended it, as introduced, would have extended it for 2 more years. But instead, the House amended it to take away the deadline altogether. And it passed that. It went to the Senate, and the Senate committee proposed a minor amendment, but basically this is likely to pass, and it's going to mean that there will be a perpetual right of owners of involuntarily merged lots to have them restored to pre-merger status. House Bill 332 allows a planning board up to 30 additional days to consider an application if it is deemed to be a development of regional impact. Under current law, there's a 65-day deadline from the time that an application is accepted as complete, and House Bill 30 would extend that 65-day period for an additional 30 days if it is a project that's been deemed one of regional impact. The next four bills are all basically dead, but they're bills, or at least some of them are bills that were of interest, I know, to some people. House Bill 341 would have required that in residential zones where there is access to municipal water and sewer, that basically any single family dwelling be permitted to be reconfigured into a 4-family dwelling, whether it was by dividing it into 2 duplexes or a single family dwelling with 3 ADUs or whatever, but obviously would have had a significant impact on a lot of zoning ordinances. House Bill 392 dealt with membership on local land use boards. It was an effort to ensure that all voting members of any land use board are residents of the municipality, which is actually already required in statute, but there have been concerns with a few municipalities where an ex officio member, such as the city manager or town manager, was a member of the planning board. But in any event, that bill, these four that I'm talking about, have not passed. House Bill 586 was a pretty big, ambitious bill that would have made a number of changes to the zoning approval process and provided certain incentives for affordable housing. That's a bill that was in the legislature last year, and it died because of the pandemic. It came back this year, and it actually had bipartisan support, and the House committee recommended that it be passed, but it was tabled in the House. And then House Bill 588 is a bill that would have required that municipalities allow so-called tiny houses in every residential district, and also allow tiny house parks in similar to mobile home or manufactured housing parks. So as I say, those bills are all essentially dead. House Bill 586, as I mentioned, was tabled. The other 3 bills, 341, 392, and 588, met sort of an unusual fate. The House, as many of you know, had a marathon 3-day session at the beginning, the first week in April, to deal with all of their remaining House bills. And they had a deadline of April 9th to act on all House bills. And but at the end of the day on April 9th, they still had some, I'm not sure how many, but several dozen bills that they had not acted on. And they adjourned the session without acting on those bills. And because the deadline passed, something I've never seen before, but the bills just essentially die. I think there's a very, very almost non-existent theoretical possibility that they could still move forward, but that would involve some very unusual procedural moves. So, as I say, they are essentially dead for this year. They could be refiled, but it would have to be as a new bill next year. Senate Bill 85, I know some of you were interested in this, creates a broadband matching grant initiative, and that is within the Office of Strategic Initiatives, and it is intended to provide, as indicated, matching grants for municipalities and others that are trying to develop and expand broadband. And there are some eligibility requirements, and I'm not going to go through that in detail. Obviously, for this to be of any use, the matching grant fund needs some money. I don't think that there actually is an appropriation yet, so it'll be a question of whether that actually is funded in the state budget this year. Senate Bill 86 is one of the omnibus bills that the Senate had this year in an effort to be more efficient because of the difficulty in holding hearings. They, rather than have the usual 200 or 300 Senate bills, they combined a lot of them into so-called omnibus bills, and Senate Bill 86 is one of them. And so it covers a number of things. One of them is the process for third-party review once a planning board has approved a building project. This is something that's been an issue for the last couple of years. There are concerns about applicants, once their projects are approved, about them having to pay, in some cases, exorbitant costs to have a third party that's approved by the planning board to inspect the project. So Senate Bill 86 imposes a requirement that the planning board, in consultation with the developer, come up with a project scope so that the developer has a reasonable idea of what they're going to be paying for when they're paying the cost of having someone inspect their project during construction. Senate Bill 86 also establishes, or actually reestablishes, a housing and conservation planning program. It's a program that would be administered by the Office of Strategic Initiatives, and the idea, and I'll just, because I can't say it as eloquently as it's written, but the purpose of it is to provide technical assistance, matching grants to municipalities to plan for growth and development in a manner that permits a balanced housing stock, including higher density and workforce housing opportunities, and promotes, whenever possible, the reuse of existing buildings, including historic properties, while protecting communities' natural resources through more efficient and compact development. So, and it's an entirely optional program. Municipalities can apply for grants and technical assistance to help them with planning for housing and conservation. And again, as with the broadband matching grant initiative, that will require funding, and I don't believe the bill actually makes an appropriation. So again, that would be subject to funding in the state budget. I should have mentioned Senate Bill 85 has passed the Senate. It is in the House, was referred to the Finance Committee. The hearing has not been scheduled yet. And Senate Bill 86 has passed the Senate, has been referred to the House Municipal and County Government Committee, and that hearing has not been scheduled yet either. There's a typo there, municipal and county, not count. Senate Bill 88 has to do with bonds for broadband infrastructure. There's a process right now for municipalities to issue bonds that first requires that they issue a request for proposals to broadband supply providers. House Bill or Senate Bill 88 changes that process, and to be perfectly honest, it's kind of I am not intimately familiar with the details of how it does that, but it does change that process somewhat. And then the last bill I'll mention is Senate Bill 95, which deals with remote meetings of public bodies. as you've all been doing for the last year, under Emergency Order 12, you're allowed to conduct meetings remotely. But once Emergency Order 12 goes away, once the state of emergency ends, that ability goes away unless there's a change to statute. So Senate Bill 95 would allow public bodies to continue to do by statute what they're currently allowed to do under the emergency order. That has passed, and it only authorizes it for a year. It has a sunset date of June 30th of 2022. And it also creates a committee to study the issue of remote meetings to make sure that the process is working well in the meantime. So that has passed the Senate, and it has a hearing in the House Judiciary Committee on May 4th, which is next Tuesday, if anyone is interested in testifying at that. I think I may have used up all of my 15 minutes, so I'll stop. But Sylvia, if you want to open it to questions, or if nobody has any, that's okay too. Whatever you want to do.
Okay, anyone have any questions for Cordell? That was very concise, and I'm not seeing any hands raised. You can wet an applause from Linda. So, okay, that's good.
Okay, well, thank you. You can follow developments on these and other bills in our legislative bulletin on our website every Friday afternoon, and always feel free to contact me if you have any questions. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Cordell. I know for specifically SB 95, the remote meetings, our group is very interested in that one. Especially Dick Snow has been asking me about that on and off during the last year, and really hope that that goes through. So happy to hear about that success. All right, Jeff, we have one more item on our agenda, and this does require an action. So please don't leave quite yet. Do you mind if I just go right into it, Jeff?
Please.
Okay. So this is for the town of Chester, a local source water protection plan. We've been awarded a local source water protection grant to update the town of Chester's source water protection plan. We just need a vote of authorization. The amount is $16,023. Town of Chester does have to put in a match, which they have already have in their budget. So we're all good to go. And the action is to authorize the executive director to execute a contract with the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services to update the town of Chester's source water protection plan.
So moved. Linda Kuhnhart, Francistown.
Thank you, Linda.
Deb Levens, Londonderry, second.
Thank you, Deb. I will go through the list. Bill Herman, Auburn.
Yes.
In Bedford, Bill DeShaco.
Yes.
Charlie Fairman.
Yes.
Bill Jean.
Yes.
Candia Al Hall.
Yes.
Dick Snow. Still not there. Chester Deb Munson.
Yes.
Deerfield Bob Cody.
Yes.
In Derry, Jeff Moulton.
Yes.
John O'Connor.
Yes.
And David McPherson.
Yes.
In Francistown, Linda Kuhnhart.
Yes.
And I realized that I've been asking Al Eisenberg, but he is an alternate, so we will just thank Al for being here. Goffstown, we have Barbara Griffin.
Yes.
And Dave Pierce. And Joanne Duffy.
Yes.
Thanks, Joanne. Hooksett Cutler Brown.
Yes.
In Londonderry, Brian Battaglia.
Yes.
Deb Levens.
Yes.
Arthur Rugg.
Yes.
And Suzanne Brunel.
Yes.
Manchester, Peter Capano.
Yes.
And Ray Clement.
Yes.
Thanks, Ray, for hanging in there. New Boston, Mark Sunan,
Yes.
and in Ware, Tom Clow,
Yes.
and in Wyndham, Peter Griffin. Okay, Peter, dropped off. Thank you, everyone.
It's when the so our other commissioner, Patrick Bean, is not in. Does that not make Alfred Eisenberg?
This is Peter, yes, on that one.
Oh, thanks, Peter.
Sorry.
Oh, that's right, Patrick Bain. Okay, Alfred. Are you
Yes.
still there? Thanks, Alfred. Thank you for that, Linda. Okay, goodness gracious. We've gotten through. Whew. Thanks,
It's
everybody,
Monday
for
after the
hanging
full
in
moon
there.
too. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.